Victoria 3. It's the economy, stupid. Hi folks, your dad here. I was out getting some milk and I thought I'd go ahead and review Paradox Interactive's latest grand strategy game, Victoria 3. So, what is Victoria 3? Well, Vicky 3, as the young people call it, is a game that takes place during the Victorian era from 1836 to 1936. The game is mostly historically accurate at the start. I mean, okay, there are a whole bunch of things that probably aren't, but for most people, it's historically accurate. But once you unpause the game, it goes from there. You can follow a historical path or forge your own path. Example, you can play as the United States and end slavery without the Civil War. You can play Russia and adopt communism early. You can play China and industrialize early. Or play Japan and conquer the United States. The list goes on and on. So, let's look at this game in the sense of its various systems. First, let's look at what this game is under the hood. The game seems, to me at least, to be built on the Imperator Rome engine. Is that bad? Not really. I actually think Imperator was a test run for some of the Vicky 3 systems, which I will get to. The tech tree seems to be borrowed from this game, as a matter of fact, and, well, even some of the state micromanagement. Again, this isn't a bad thing, as I actually liked Imperator and played it before the game came out to refamiliarize myself with how these games work. You passively research technology, you can build universities, and it spreads to your country. It lets your production, military, or society change to the modern age. Next, under the hood are various characters or leaders. If you've played Crusader Kings, then you already have an idea of what I'm talking about. These people lead parties, interest groups, armies, navies, and the country. They have good and bad traits. These affect how you treat different groups. Many of these are actually based on historical people. It is fun to see these people do ahistorical things, such as Abraham Lincoln leading the communists, or Karl Marx dying in a duel. They can do somewhat historical things as well, such as, for example, Sigmund Freud can lead the intelligentsia in your country. That part is really kind of fun. Now, let's talk about the controversial things, at least in the community. War. War in this game is not like any of the other titles the company has made. Usually you click and move your armies, and you make them take the provinces. You create a front like Hearts of Iron. Instead, there's this build-up to war where you have posturing. You can court various nations to help you, or at least not help the other guy. There is a build-up to the conflict, which I admit is kind of neat in that you don't know what will happen. There's tension there, and it does feel palatable. You can back down, of course, from declaring war, but there are penalties. You can also have the other side back down and give you what you demanded first. Now, this seems like it's a good thing, but sometimes diplomacy is stronger than words, and you can get a whole area, a state, without a shot being fired. This is and can be frustrating because, like, example is the United States. You can demand all of the Southwest and Mexico just gives you Colorado. You have to wait 5 more years before you can try to declare war again. When the war starts, you don't control the units like you would in other Paradox titles. Instead, you either advance or defend the front. You can do naval invasions as well. Admittedly, the AI struggles here sometimes defending its borders. One example is that Great Britain will send all of their troops to China, and if you're, let's say, France or Sweden, you can just invade and maybe even get them to surrender the part of Canada that you want. After the war, you get an infamy rating for taking land. This is very much like its predecessor, Victoria 2. If this builds up too fast, people will band together against you. It's a good mechanic, but it's not without its faults. In one case, Great Britain crushed a communist revolt in their own country, and it made so much infamy that the great powers made them release all of their colonies. I then in turn made South Africa my puppet, like a vassal country. It was both hilarious and sad at the same time. Before I talk about the core mechanic, the economy, I do want to talk about pops. Pops are, for better terms, are a group of people in the country that have certain beliefs, ideas, and aspirations in your country. This is a really cool system. It's kind of like The Sims maxed way out. For example, you have a Swedish Protestant who are coal miners. They really want more rights. They want, different kinds of things. Now, these Swedish Protestants who are coal miners are different than Swedish Protestants who are in the intelligentsia in the university that want women to vote. These groups form parties, and these parties can get radical and try to overthrow your government, which is both neat and terrifying. Giving in to these radicals can be good for stability but bad for the economy. To change laws in your country, it uses the siege mechanic from EU4 or the archaeology mechanic from Stellaris, so there is some randomness to if you can pass a law. Sometimes you can end slavery with an 8% chance. Sometimes you can end slavery at an 85% chance after waiting 5 or 6 years. You can also form a coalition government. As an American, I really learned about foreign democracies this way, and maybe a little about my own parties here in the States. It made me realize why sometimes a country might reform its government many times. I'm looking at you, France. Speaking of France, I want to talk about colonization and the rush for Africa. It is very different from EU4. That's Europa Universalis for all of you older folks who don't know what that means. What you end up doing to colonize is first you have to pass a law to colonize. Then you have to send people there to do it. As time goes on, you expand the borders, similar to early Stellaris, where you would build a star base and slowly your border would expand. Along the way, you would fight natives, and sometimes the great powers might even ally with the natives against you. It does create border gore, so at least that part's historically accurate, but why would you even want to colonize? Well, this leads us to the final part of our game and the most important part, the economy. At its core, Vicky 3 is an engine. It is similar to surviving Mars in this case. You have to have people get the basic resources, such as iron, food, and wood, to make advanced resources, such as steel, groceries, and paper, to trade or make more goods, such as small arms, luxury furniture, luxury clothes, to make the people happy so they produce more of everything so you can make more things. This is a gross oversimplification, but it really does work. You can see what your pops need and make the stuff for them so they can make more. So the core mechanic, the core loop of the game is to make stuff to make money to make stuff. What the game teaches you is a really important lesson to understand our modern world and our current situation. You can have bubbles and bursts of goods, input shortages, and people leaving jobs because they don't pay enough. I feel like there might be some modern 2022 things that people could relate to. You know, bubbles and bursts of goods, input shortages, people leaving jobs because they don't pay enough. If you do introduce too much social welfare, the people might not work, or you might not have enough money to pay your troops. In my case, the people wanted welfare. So I thought, okay, I can pass this. I did. And in turn, I had to raise taxes because it almost bankrupted my country paying people to not work. Of course, when I raised taxes, it made the people radical, so they didn't want to work. So I had to build, it's the core, but it's in the other direction. So instead of the core loop of money going up, the core loop was money going down. Overall, I would rate this game as an 8 out of 10. If you're familiar with Paradox games or grand strategy games in general, you won't really struggle. You might not know what's going on, but you won't struggle. If you're new to these kinds of games, there is a learning curve, and it's pretty sharp. The game does explain better than most what you are doing and why, but it's not easy. Overall, you learn about the rise of capitalism and how people's quality of life can improve, but also the dark side of, coal and steel mills. Victoria 3, it is the best of times and the worst of times. This has been your dad playing Victoria 3.